The courtroom was gripped by silence as the video began to play, grainy, unsettling footage that conveyed more than words ever could. Almost immediately, Diddy's twin daughters, Jessie and Delilah, stood up, visibly disturbed, and left the room without speaking. Reporters whispered, they looked pale, ashamed, as cameras remained off. The footage wasn't just explicit, it was damning. Titled Freak Off, it echoed the term Cassie Ventura used to describe the darkest chapter of her relationship with Sean Diddy Combs. What had once circulated as rumors and quiet speculation had now erupted into federal testimony, concrete evidence, and raw emotion in the courtroom. This was no longer a mere celebrity scandal, it had become a public reckoning. From menacing text messages to disturbing surveillance footage, the trial was exposing years of silence, and even Diddy's family could no longer bear to watch. What followed would forever alter how many view him. As the courtroom lights dimmed and the prosecution asked for attention, the weight of anticipation was clear, something major was coming. But no one was ready for what followed. The judge approved a long-whispered piece of evidence to be shown to the jury, a video labeled Freak Off 2013, filmed at a Miami penthouse. Prosecutors had warned of its disturbing nature, and Diddy's legal team tried hard to prevent its showing. Still, the judge ruled in favor of transparency. A partial media blackout was enforced. Cameras were turned off, and only the jury, legal teams, Diddy, and a few select observers, including his family, were allowed to view it. As the footage began, Cassie Ventura, the prosecution's central witness, sat near the jury box without a flinch. Meanwhile, Diddy's demeanor shifted noticeably. The confidence he'd displayed in earlier sessions faded, his posture slumped, hands tightly clasped, eyes locked on the screen. Midway through the video, Jessie and Delilah rose from their seats. A witness claimed one of them muttered, "No, I can't," before walking out. They left without emotion, their expressions vacant yet shaken. Outside, reporters saw them exit the courthouse, flanked by aides and security, offering no comment. Although the video was not shown in full detail in court filings, a summary provided key points. Cassie was seen with an unidentified individual in what prosecutors described as a scripted and directed encounter. Diddy's voice could allegedly be heard behind the camera, instructing the participants. While portions were censored or blurred, the emotional weight of the video was unmistakable. Several jurors appeared visibly shaken, one reportedly wiped away tears, while another sat motionless, jaw clenched. This wasn't mere tabloid material, it was evidence of control, of manipulation, of Cassie's truth. The setting, her age, the setup, all aligned with her previous testimony. As the video ended and the screen went dark, the courtroom remained silent. There were no murmurs, no reactions, only the judge's voice instructing a brief recess. When Cassie finally took the stand, it was evident how difficult this moment was for her and everyone in the room. 8 months pregnant, she entered calmly, took off her coat, and turned toward the jury. Throughout her testimony, she gently rubbed her belly, a quiet yet powerful gesture. She wasn't just revisiting trauma, she was also safeguarding a future. Cassie spoke of the first time Diddy introduced the term freak off. She was 21 then and didn't understand what it meant. He described it as a form of voyeurism, saying it would bring them closer. What began as something intimate soon spiraled into a cycle of control. He dictated what she should wear, what to say, and which drugs to take. Cassie shared text messages with the court showing exchanges about pills from his Louis Vuitton med bag. In one, she asked, which color pill, and he replied, the green one. Cassie testified that the freak-offs were not spontaneous events but carefully planned and choreographed. Everything, from the lighting and outfits to the camera placement, was prearranged. Most disturbing, she said, were the participants, many of whom were escorts she sometimes hired out of fear of what would happen if she didn't comply. I did it because I thought I loved him, because I was afraid of making him angry, because I no longer knew how to say no, she told the court. When asked about her emotional state during that period, she said she felt worthless. There were times I'd look in the mirror and not recognize who I had become, she said. When the prosecution asked if she had ever wanted to be part of the freak-offs, she hesitated before answering. At times, yes, because it meant I got to be with him. But I never wanted the rest of it, the fear, the pressure. Diddy, meanwhile, was visibly unraveling. Courtroom observers noted him nervously scribbling on a yellow notepad and shaking his leg. At one point, he leaned in to whisper to his lawyer while gesturing toward Cassie. His complexion had gone pale. The man once known as the life of the party now looked like someone trapped in his own mental sentencing. The defense argued everything was consensual, claiming Cassie was willing, participated in hiring others, and never explicitly said no. The prosecution challenged that notion by asking, what happens to a woman who knows the cost of saying no? As Cassie's testimony settled in, Diddy's family struggled to remain composed. His mother, Janice Combs, sat silently with her eyes closed, clutching a rosary. His sons, King and Justin, kept their arms folded and avoided looking at their father, occasionally watching the jury's reactions. His daughters, Jessie and Delilah, both just 17, seemed especially shaken. Until then, they had remained calm, but watching a video and confronting its implications visibly broke them. Their reaction led many to wonder whether more family secrets might soon surface. The prosecution pointed to Diddy's ex, Kim Porter. Cassie testified that he discouraged going public with their relationship, citing concerns for his children and Kim's feelings. But she also claimed Diddy's relationships overlapped. We weren't public for a long time, but he was still with Kim. We both knew. He made sure we both knew. That's when things took an even darker turn. Cassie recalled a time when Kim confronted Diddy about his behavior. A week later, Kim was hospitalized. He told me not to say anything, Cassie said. He said she was fine. Kim's death years later, officially ruled pneumonia, raised more questions. Many, including Albie Shaw, Kim's ex and Quincy's father, believe her death deserves further investigation. Prosecutors introduced messages where Cassie expressed fear of ending up like Kim. When asked why, she responded, because she knew too much, and he knew that she knew. The courtroom grew silent as Cassie described what she said was a system behind the freak-offs. It wasn't just Diddy involved. According to her, a network of people supported the operation. She listed names, David, James, Christina Karoram, and mentioned assistants, travel agents, and private security staff. They weren't just present. They were complicit. She testified that they were helping to make it all happen. One of the most powerful parts of her statement came when she explained how Diddy kept tabs on her. He didn't live far, but if she didn't respond, he would send someone, sometimes a security guard, sometimes Christina. If she hadn't replied within an hour, someone would show up at her door. That detail hit the courtroom hard, supporting what prosecutors had suggested from the start. Diddy's control wasn't just emotional, it bordered on constant surveillance. She said he had full access to her phone, her location, and even her private messages. Once, when she tried to have a friend visit, the friend never arrived. Diddy told her he had warned the friend away. She didn't ask for details. When the prosecutor asked if she felt afraid for her safety, Cassie didn't pause. Every day, she answered. But I feared for hers too. According to Cassie, the system Diddy built wasn't random, it was organized and intentional. There were fake travel bookings, forged documents, and false identities. Sometimes women were labeled as dancers or stylists to get them on flights. The trips stretched across cities: Miami, Los Angeles, New York, Ibiza. Each time, it was the same pattern: drugs, outfits, lighting, and the setup. As she described scenes that lasted between 36 and 72 hours, sometimes even for straight days with no sleep, the courtroom was silent. It was pills, directions, and waiting for Diddy to give the signal to stop. That signal rarely came early. Prosecutors emphasized that this wasn't just about one man's private behavior. It was a calculated, business-like operation involving manipulation, coercion, and exploitation. Each name Cassie mentioned expanded the pool of possible witnesses. What started as a logistical account gradually turned into something psychological. That's when jurors began to see how deeply Diddy's hold over Cassie ran. This wasn't just physical abuse, it was emotional domination. She admitted something that made the entire courtroom still. I loved him, she said softly. It hit hard. I loved him the way you love someone who saves you, even if they're the one causing you pain. She recalled how, in the early days, Diddy could be loving, generous, and thoughtful. He made me feel like I was the only person who mattered. But that affection came with conditions. To keep that feeling alive, she had to comply, participate, and stay silent. She said it became addictive. Love was the reward, fear was the cost. The prosecution showed text messages Cassie had sent to Diddy, messages full of love and eagerness. The defense would later argue these were signs of mutual consent. But Cassie explained that she wrote them to stay safe. I said what I needed to say to feel safe, she told the court. Sometimes it wasn't about the act itself. It was about getting through the moment. One story stood out. Cassie had tried to avoid participating in one of the so-called freak-offs by sending an email expressing discomfort. Diddy replied, "I know you don't want to do it." Instead of standing her ground, she backed down. "I was scared he'd cut me off," she said. "I told him that wasn't it. I lied because telling the truth would have made him angry." The jury was riveted. Some jurors nodded slowly, perhaps recognizing the emotional tug-of-war she described, loving someone who also causes harm, torn between craving closeness and needing safety. Her voice broke just once, when the prosecutor asked, "Did you ever enjoy it?" Cassie's response left the courtroom stunned, not because of what she said about the acts themselves, but because it revealed that spending time with him had become something twisted. "I didn't enjoy what we did," she admitted, "but I loved him, and that made everything confusing." By that point, it was clear her story wasn't just a one-off. It pointed to something more disturbing. Prosecutors drew a direct line between Cassie's experience and that of Diddy's longtime ex and mother of his children, Kim Porter. When Cassie was asked if she ever feared for her life, she replied, "Yes, especially after what happened with Kim." She claimed Diddy was evasive about Kim's final days. "He just said she was sick. But I don't believe that anymore." The court was reminded that Kim Porter was found dead in 2018. Her death was officially ruled as pneumonia, but suspicions lingered. Many, including Albeit Shaw, Porter's former partner and Quincy's biological father, have called for her death to be re-investigated. She was fine one day, Cassie testified, and gone the next. The suspicion deepened when Cassie revealed that after Kim's death, she was told to remain silent. "He warned me not to speak to anyone, said people were watching, and told me to stay out of it." Prosecutors presented text messages between Cassie and a friend, where she wrote, "If I ever disappear like Kim, it wasn't random." The most chilling moment came when prosecutors asked Cassie whether she believed her fate could have mirrored Kim's. She paused, then answered, "Yes. That's why I left. That's why I'm here." The weight in the courtroom grew heavier. Cassie's fear wasn't only about her own safety, it reflected something much deeper. Her voice carried echoes of another woman who, some believe, was silenced too soon. The judge called for a break. Some jurors sat quietly, heads bowed. Diddy remained motionless, silent, pale, and increasingly boxed in, not just by the court, but by his past. By the third day of testimony, emotions were already high. But everything shifted when the judge made a decision that shook the room. Despite strong objections from the defense, the jury was allowed to view a brief portion of a recorded freak-off video. The footage, reportedly filmed by Diddy and stored on a private hard drive, had been recovered by Cassie before she left him. Although no cameras were allowed in the courtroom, witnesses described the scene as haunting. As the room darkened and the screen flickered on, everyone leaned in. Even the court sketch artist stopped drawing. The reaction was immediate. People looked away, shaken. One juror covered her mouth. But the most startling moment came when Diddy's twin daughters, Jessie and Delilah, who had been sitting silently beside their grandmother Janice, stood up and abruptly left the courtroom. Observers noted the shock on their faces, wide eyes, trembling lips. They didn't return. The video wasn't graphic in the traditional sense, but it revealed something more insidious: control, silence. Cassie's body language was rigid, her eyes flicking between the camera and someone behind it. Her discomfort was unmistakable. Her movement seemed forced, as if she were obeying commands she didn't want to follow. When the footage ended, prosecutors asked Cassie to explain what had just been shown. "That was the first time I cried in front of him after a freak-off," she said. "I couldn't take it anymore, and he still picked up the camera." Her voice trembled but stayed steady. The defense objected again and again, insisting the clip lacked context and was consensual. But by then, the damage was done. The damage was already done. The combination of the visual evidence, Cassie's explanation, and earlier testimony created a powerful picture, not just of abuse, but of a routine, something rehearsed and controlled. One juror whispered to another, "That's all I needed." In that moment, the mood shifted. This trial was no longer only about Cassie's words, it had taken on a face, a video, and a courtroom full of people who could no longer ignore what they had seen. Cassie's final day on the stand ended with a warning: there were more survivors. That warning quickly gained weight. By the start of the next court session, the prosecution learned that more former employees, drivers, assistants, and even a former hairstylist were willing to come forward. Prosecutors moved swiftly. Israel Flores, a former hotel security officer, testified about an incident at the Intercontinental Hotel in Los Angeles, supporting Cassie's earlier claims. "I saw her with a bruised eye. I was told to ignore it," he said, "but I logged it anyway." His testimony provided an independent confirmation of what the 2016 surveillance footage had suggested. Then, a former assistant, who chose to remain anonymous, said she was asked to transport locked briefcases across state lines. "I didn't know what was inside," she explained, "but the instructions were clear: don't open, don't ask questions." Under prosecution questioning, she admitted she suspected the cases contained cash or drugs. Why else lock them and send her along with a burner phone? The most striking testimony came from a male escort named Daniel Phillip. He said he was hired multiple times in 2012 and 2013, but what started as a private contract quickly became coercive. "I didn't want to return, but I was told if I didn't, they would ruin my license and career." Phillip named Diddy as the orchestrator, saying, "He told me where to go, what to do, and he watched." Each new witness added weight to Cassie's story. More importantly, their accounts revealed a consistent pattern: invitations extended, NDAs signed, money exchanged, and always, Diddy in control. The prosecution wasn't just piecing together isolated events, they were building a case showing a pattern, an organized system, and possibly a criminal conspiracy. With every name, every connection, every hesitant recollection, Diddy's empire began to look less like an entertainment label and more like a machine designed to silence victims. By this point, the confident image of Sean Diddy Combs sitting at the defense table had vanished. The man who once commanded rooms with swagger now appeared defeated, eyes shifting nervously between lawyers and jurors, sweating visibly. His carefully constructed persona, forged over decades of fame, power, and control, was unraveling in front of everyone. Then, during a brief recess, Diddy unexpectedly asked to speak to the judge. It was an odd, unscripted moment. His lawyers leaned in, trying to stop him, but he stood anyway. "Excuse me, Your Honor," he said quietly. "I'm a little nervous." The courtroom fell silent. The judge raised an eyebrow and said, "Mr. Combs, you'll have your time through counsel." But that simple line revealed everything. When court resumed, the prosecution announced they planned to call a new witness, someone mentioned earlier in the trial and in past interviews but whose testimony had never been certain: Gene Deal, Diddy's former bodyguard. The gallery gasped when his name was announced. Deal had long spoken about Diddy's darker side. He shared stories about freakouts, Kim Porter, NDAs, burner phones, and security teams silencing staff. Until now, he had only been a voice on podcasts and YouTube. But now, he might be called to testify in court. The defense quickly objected, raising concerns about hearsay and credibility. Still, the judge allowed a sidebar. When the session resumed, it was clear that Gene Deal's testimony was moving forward. "We'll hear from him on Monday," the judge announced. As the day ended, Diddy lowered his head. The lasting image wasn't Cassie's testimony or the video evidence. It was Diddy, quiet and alone, watching his daughters walk by without saying a word or making eye contact. The man who once controlled everything, the music we listened to, the artists we adored, the parties everyone talked about, no longer commanded the room. While the freak-off footage may have changed the story, the truth coming from former insiders and his own weakening defense had altered his legacy. This case had grown beyond a legal battle, it had become a reckoning.